Welcome back. We are live at 5 or just after. Actually, our lovely friend Alan here was actually on an interview with Plymouth Live, so that's why we're a little bit delayed. Shout out to Roger. Hopefully you can see us now. We have got some images going out to you now, so thank you very much for sticking with us, Roger. So we're in the part of concluding our Pride Rewind event, and obviously we've been asking you for questions throughout the day. We've picked a few out of those questions to kind of focus upon, depending, because we've got our fantastic guests here. So we're joined by Donna and Alan and also Juliet. So one of the questions that came in was that obviously we've got a massively diverse community, and what we've seen for people, we've kind of focused on for Pride Rewind looking back. So looking about over the last 50 years and that history. But actually we received questions from two best friends who are kind of teenagers, and they said, what's in store for us? So they want to know, looking into the future. Obviously, next year is going to be a big year for us. Look into the future. What does Pride in Plymouth do with the LGBT youth? How do they support them? And what have you got planned for the future? Who would like to discuss that? Alan, is that okay? Go for it.
Okay,
no worries.
Right. Yes, I'm glad you asked me that. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, we work very closely with a group that exists in the city called Out Youth, which is run by Plymouth City Council and is aimed at 13 to 25-year-olds who are LGBTQ, with a real emphasis on that Q potentially leading to questioning. So they're on hand, and we've worked with them through the archive and Pride in Our Past and ongoing things. I often turn up at their meetings and just bother them with stuff which they're very polite about. So that's one link. We do an awful lot of work in schools now, actually. We're invited into schools. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's there's always been this fear that you're going to come in and do some sort of sex education lesson if you're talking about LGBT. Well, actually, what we do with our work with the archive is we talk about a community, and we talk about the people in that, in the lives that they've led. So that's very important to us, to keep doing that work in schools in Plymouth and very often around the southwest more recently. And then the big thing for me, big hot off the press announcement, because I'm finally allowed to talk about it because we've got the go ahead. Yeah,
exclusive.
Exclusive is a project that, to be perfectly honest, I've wanted to do with the archive really since the first year when we put it together, and we're calling it The Rainbow Connection, which is a song by Kermit the Frog, if anybody knows it, because it's a really nice song by Kermit the Frog, and it is kind of how my brain works. So it's The Rainbow Connection, and it comes out of this idea that actually, if you're a young LGBTQ plus person, there's a very good chance that possibly mum and dad or whoever your kind of role models are maybe aren't. You know, if you come from different cultures, ethnicities, there's a very good chance, I'm generalizing massively, but there's a very good chance that perhaps mum and dad's experience maps onto yours, nan and granddad's experience maps onto theirs, and there's a kind of continuity there. Well, if you're LGBT, very often you're reinventing the wheel, really. You're born, you don't, you know, you're aware of a difference, perhaps you might not know what that difference is, and it becomes very confusing. So we've got young people in that situation. Finally, in Plymouth, as we talked about with the archive earlier, after nagging people, we've got an older generation who are talking about who they are and the lives they've led. So it's like, how do we take that heritage, that experience, and hand it on to these young people who would probably like to know about it? And that's the Rainbow Connection. So we're working with Bernardo's, we're working with a number of schools around the city, we're working with the university to kind of bridge that gap, as it were, and create a way through the oral history process where young people can gain access to these stories, possibly even, I mean, this is where Bernardo's have been really supportive, look at a kind of mentoring scheme where young people can talk to somebody, and, you know, because yes, there are differences, times have changed, but also there's an awful lot of similarities. When we've brought groups together, you know, somebody who's 80 and someone who's 18 has a lot of commonality in sort of coming out stories and things like that. And then the thing that's most recently come to light is, because of all the Section 28 legislation, we have a group in the middle who are really the parents of these young people, who are kind of like, I don't have all the answers and I wish I did. You know, my young person's just come out to me as trans. I don't have a massive experience of this. And they're getting it wrong, and they're beating themselves up for getting it wrong. So actually, if we can connect these generations, then maybe we can help that process. So yes, that's really what we're going to be doing very strongly over the next sort of 2 years, really.
That's brilliant. And maybe we should move on to you, Juliet, because obviously, you know, talking about trans legislation and everything like as kind of growing up trans, kind of your experience, and how are you working with the Not Alone organisation as well to kind of help move forward?
So we're trying to get back to our weekly meetings of doing face-to-face support groups. Obviously, at the moment, we've had to do that over Zoom instead of doing a face-to-face meeting because of the virus.
It's the go-to at the moment, isn't it?
But we've been having really good interactions with that as well. And we're also looking towards further things we can offer as a support group, and obviously, in the future, we're also looking towards Trans Day of Remembrance in November as well. So that's probably our next event that's coming up in the community.
And that would be really important because obviously if we're looking back for Pride Rewind, you know, the rights were started by the trans community, which is great to kind of tie that in and move everything forward, which I think is really prevalent. Oh, thanks so much for joining us, Juliet. It's a pleasure as well. And thanks for compiling all the video. It's fantastic.
That's okay. Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. So also one of the other questions we've had, obviously we covered various issues kind of throughout the day in our celebration. You know, we're looking at ourselves in kind of Devon and Cornwall and down in the southwest, but looking at Pride across the world. Obviously, 500 Prides have been cancelled this year, and it's really important to maintain the visibility. But we understand looking, you know, we spoke about hate crimes earlier as well, and kind of support of other LGBT communities. So we had a question about kind of asylum seekers and how that Plymouth itself are they looking outside of Plymouth? Are they looking outside and helping other communities as well? And especially maybe asylum seekers from LGBT communities and elsewhere. So could one of you expand maybe on kind of the work that Pride in Plymouth are doing with that?
Yeah, okay, yes, certainly. I mean, it's interesting, actually, you're saying about looking outside. We are looking outside in our work with the asylum seekers, but in a strange way we're not, because actually they're part of our family now. So
Right.
Yeah, it's so I mean, what's happened really to Pride in Plymouth over the last two and a bit years now is, and I've learned all this on the hoof, and so Donna and all the people working with, you know, Plymouth's a dispersal city, and because it's a dispersal city, it's one of 5 cities in the UK where if you come to the UK seeking asylum, you will be placed in one of those cities. And people are placed here from all over the world in all sorts of circumstances. And I guess we should have thought of it earlier. One of the reasons people flee the country that they're, you know, native to is because they're LGBT and they're oppressed for that. And, you know, I've heard some awful, horrifying stories of situations that people have run from, basically. So they arrive here in Plymouth. They don't know Plymouth very well. Very often they're talking in a second language, they're learning a second language very quickly, and they're needing to talk about being LGBT without really understanding maybe what that means or having the language to explain how they feel. So, I mean, it'd be difficult enough in your first language, nearly impossible in your second language. And because of what we do around the oral history process and interviewing people, we've been able to work with people to help them kind of verbalize who they are. And perhaps more importantly, just, you know, that they're part of our community, that they're part of our group. We've even reached the point, crazy as it sounds, where we've been able to go with them to different sort of court hearings and give evidence to support who they are, which, you know, nobody really should have to do, but it's the circumstances in which we find ourselves. So, you know, we've been able to help a number of asylum seekers through that process. And then the great thing is that they then, you know, gain leave to remain in the UK, and with a great number of them, they've stayed in Plymouth to become part of Pride in Plymouth and actually start giving back to other people who are in that same situation. So-
That's a real amazing example of the incredible work that Pride in Plymouth is doing. I think that's really like testament to you guys and your sense of community and openness as well, of inclusivity for all, not just the LGBT community, but for all as well. And I really commend you on that. That's absolutely brilliant. Well, I'm kind of doing my Graham Norton thing here today, and I've got no lever or a red chair to ditch anyone, but I do want to ask, there were some questions, you know, people have really enjoyed our live streams today, and they've been really getting involved, and we have some lovely interactions and shares and visits here at the exhibition as well. But people are really excited to know, have you got any nuggets of information about next year for us? What is Pride in Plymouth planning for next year? We feel it's going to be an incredibly big one. Amazing what Duncan was talking about with the badges and the flags. And if we can kind of get that started and really put this flag together, that would be amazing to fly that next year and all the badges. So can you give us any little bits of information?
I think there's several projects kind of in the pipeline that we want to kind of invest into and kind of expand the archive. Most definitely, it's important to get a full range of voices in that archive and to preserve them and digitise them and get them out there and accessible for people. I think that's the next 18 months, which is really important. Other nuggets?
Ooh, I don't know. Yes, I mean we'll be back on the. He says, tempting fate. We'll be back on the Hoe again. I think now we've got to the Hoe. We're never going to leave the Hoe.
Right.
We loved Devonport Park in a whole number of ways, which is where we started. And the bandstand was great. But people wanted a parade. And the only way to really do a parade was to be city centre based. And if you've ever been on Plymouth Hoe, there really isn't a better backdrop. It's merciless when the wind's blowing, which is what kind of did for us last year. But so we're very keen to sort of be back on the Hoe, to have a really significant march through the city again. And I'm going to call it a march because it is still a march, actually. Yes. It's, yes, it's about celebrating who we are. Yes, it's about celebrating how far we've come. But, the plan for last year, and we had to cancel because of the weather, but the plan was for the asylum seeker group to lead the parade, actually, because we really felt that they were in the position to that. The year before that, Not Alone led the parade. We're really keen to highlight these voices. And I think, as Donna says, that's really what we're going to keep doing over the next sort of...
That's what you're all about. And that'll be absolutely amazing to see that. And fingers crossed, it's all good. I'm sure it will be. And it'll be a massive... massive, incredible celebration. I'm sure everyone cannot absolutely wait for that. So we're kind of going to be winding down our rewind and concluding today's event. And thanks for sharing those little nuggets, I'm sure. But as we move forward, there is something that we do for Pride in Plymouth every year, and it's to kind of commemorate all those of our LGBTQI plus community that are no longer with us. So, Donna, I believe, do you want to talk about that, or have I covered that?
Well, it's just that every year, amongst all the madness, there's always an empty chair with a candle and a remembrance and a moment. Everyone always takes a moment to remember those that are not with us. They are still part of our LGBT family and always will be.
Incredible. So what we're going to do is, Donna, we're going to send you upstairs back to the exhibition, and Donna will be lighting the candle so we can use that as a real fitting conclusion to our event. Obviously, we're celebrating Pride, all about community, visibility, solidarity, and our Rewind Pride has really been looking back over the last 50 years, how far we've come, what we need to do, how we're going to move forward. There is still work to be done. And obviously, we have to remember those that have gone before us, all the struggles, and to respect those people, what they went through, and to keep that as a real part of our history and share that with all of our community and beyond. Okay, because until there is equality for all, then we still need to carry on, and Pride is so relevant. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed all our live streams. It's been a fantastic day. However you've celebrated, thank you. You're going to see us next year. It's going to be an absolute bang, I am sure. Thank you for joining us. It's been incredible to be a part of. We're now going to hand over to go upstairs for the lighting of the candle. Just everyone take a moment and let's remember. Thank you ever so much. Take care.
Hi there everybody, my name's David and this is my contribution to Plymouth Rewind this weekend. And sorry we can't all be together, but hey, next year's going to be absolutely brilliant. I'm sat here at the moment in the beauty of Central Park in Plymouth. Many people call it the green lung of Plymouth. And it's 25 years ago, on November the 6th in 1995, that on this very spot, two dear men, Terry Sweet and Bernie Hawken, were tortured, mutilated. One of them was murdered, the other, life-changing illnesses, problems for the rest of his life, and ended up wheelchair-bound. Terry and Bernie used to visit this spot, very beautiful place, in the evening, and it's known as a gay cruising area. At least it was back then. Unfortunately, one evening they met up with three teenage boys, all Plymouth lads from good Plymouth families. But the boys had been drinking cheap booze, loads of Liebfrau milk, they'd smoked cannabis, they'd taken Valium, and they were sniffing butane gas. And their objective that evening, whilst they didn't actually set out to murder, they did attack both Terry and Bernie. There was a shelter here, there's a bench here now, and this is where Terry met his end in the most appalling way. It's worth remembering, however, that albeit it was 25 years ago, the Devon and Cornwall police held out a hand to the local gay community. They showed support, they showed understanding, and they asked people from the community to get in touch with them and to set up some helplines. And this was at the Crown Hill police station. And they invited people to come in and to answer telephone calls from the community for anybody who had any inkling about who might have committed this atrocious murder. And it was to give confidence to people to ring the police, give information anonymously. And I was able to be part of that team, and the police were simply amazing. And I think that was a real change and turnaround point for relationships between the gay community and the police. The shelter was covered over, and they put some wooden hoardings all the way around, but that didn't stop the hate from continuing. And there was graffiti left on the front. In big letters, the words, "Kill the faggots. No queers here, you're banned or face death." And also, the worst of all, on the path just down beyond me here, there was the outline of a body that you'd see as in a murder crime scene, typically. So the outline of a body, and the words that were writ large on the pavement said, "Please step over, spilt AIDS." Horrendous. Things have changed, we've moved on. I don't know whether this is a cruising area or not, and I'm not going to stay to find out. Happily married man. Anyway, I've lit a candle, and there's some ribbon here to commemorate the two lives lost. One lost brutally murdered, the other life changed forever. So let's remember Terry and Bernie, and indeed remember everybody from our wonderful rainbow community in Plymouth. People you've loved and lost, people whose lives have been altered because of queer hatred. Have a wonderful Pride Rewind. I send you much love.